But I think it's important to understand, yet again, the importance of democracy, the importance of what our government was really intended to do in the first place, so that we will quit asking it to do the thing that it was never intended to do, and so that we won't keep on finding ourselves in this situation. Ronald Reagan said this: democracy is less a system of government than it is a system to keep government limited, unintrusive, a system of constraints on power to keep politics and government secondary to the important things in life, the true sources of value found only in family and faith. So you see, the American government was merely an institution to allow you the freedom to do the things that so often we want the government to do for us. I mean, it's undeniable that our government was created by benevolent people, and we want benevolent leaders. I'm not decrying that. I'm not saying that they shouldn't use benevolence in their decision making. I'm just simply suggesting this. Not that we need heartless leaders, but that we need leaders who revere humanity enough to stick to their lane. We need a political class with enough humility to realize their own limitations, to know that the most loving thing that they could do is restrict government and to enforce laws so that the people who have lawfully ascribed to this way of life can have the freedom to pursue life and liberty and happiness. And by the way, for those of you who are curious, this is a sentiment that is echoed in the Bible. In the book of Timothy, it says this, and this is 1 Timothy 2:2. Pray for kings and all who are in authority so that we may lead a tranquil and quiet life in all godliness and dignity. So in other words, that scripture verse just tells Christians this, that the role of kings or political leaders is just simply that they would have the sense to help people lead quiet and peaceable lives. That's what they're supposed to do, so that those people can then go and live the lives that they need to and create the institutions they need to that will truly be benevolent and truly do the things that the government cannot do. And here's why the government can't be our source of hope and the government can't do these things. Think about it this way. If the government became the source of benevolence, they would always find a way to hurt somebody on the other side of the aisle for political gamesmanship. Now, and they would do so at the expense of forgetting about the repercussions and the casualties of their actions and their decision making. They would do things just so that they could get ahead. They would be making political decisions. That's why the political needs to be as restricted as much as possible, because people get hurt when they are not. This is why the institution of the church is best suited for benevolence, not the government, because pastors are not running for office. If nothing else, the incentive structure is vastly less compromised. So even if you don't agree with me on the last point, you have to agree that the church is less compromised than the government and politicians. Pastors and Christians don't give because they can get votes in return. They give because it feels good to do the right thing. But they're also instructed to do so, by the way, even when it doesn't feel good, because they're called to follow a guy who was willing to get hurt and give to people anyway. So the Bible won't let Christians settle for false virtue signaling and kumbaya songs.
This land is your land, this land is my land. From the piers of Charleston to the fields of cotton, from the crowded prisons to the streets of Ferguson. This land was made for you and me.
Look, I'm sorry, I can't take those people seriously at all, even though they're supposedly coming from a Christian perspective. Get those fools to start singing about the horrors of gender-affirming care, quote-unquote gender-affirming care, and how awful it is to put people, adults and children through that, and then I might take them seriously. But until then, the most compassionate thing we can do is have strong borders to protect those in and outside of them. This will keep people with fake benevolence from actually having to walk in the light and then flee like vampires the moment they actually need to put their money where their mouth is. As a Christian, I personally am very pro-border security politically, but personally, if I find a person who was an illegal immigrant, I would give them the shirt off my back, because they're in the country and I can't do anything about it now. It's in the past. And by the way, I did this just recently with a very young girl, had to be in her late 20s maybe, that had a small baby from Guatemala, and she was here illegally and was homeless and had nowhere to go. Well, I didn't literally take my shirt off because I don't want the sister to stumble. I just met her.
Anyone for the juice bar?
But it is stories like that woman that I met that make me and other people convinced that the best way to care about people is for the government to get out of the way as much as possible and just to enforce border security. And that the best way for people to come to this country is the legal way. So why do we have a whole generation of people and misguided Christians crying out for acts of benevolence from our government? Perhaps we're afraid to let the government stick to the enforcement of laws because then we won't have somebody to blame when benevolence doesn't take place. In other words, it takes the responsibility off of our shoulders as long as we can shift the blame and look at the government, and then never have to look in the mirror and wonder why we aren't benevolent or wonder why we aren't doing things about what goes on at border towns every single day. Perhaps fatherlessness is such an issue in America today that we're just desperately looking for somebody to be our daddy, and Joe Biden will do the job. But I mean, really, do you want to be one of his kids?
He's a grown man. He is the smartest man I know.
I know this much. The government on immigration should make laws and enforce them. This is the best that they can do. Beyond that, they look for ways to manipulate the heartstrings of people for votes. That's it. And I, for one, am glad DeSantis and Abbott are calling BS on that stuff. If true democracy revolves around the proper relationship between the state and the people that are governed by the state, then for God's sake, divorce the government and find a church.
So you just got done watching a small excerpt of a much larger episode. You can find the link to that full episode down below in the description of this video. So you definitely need to check that out, because if you like that clip, you'll like the much larger episode. And while you're at it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and click that little bell to be notified when great new episodes of Anything Heard come your way. Thanks for watching.